what I'm going to try to do is put the product labs into context, talk about the problem that we're solving, why we think it's important, and how it maps to the product that we're building. Does anybody recognize this guy? No, neither did I. So you're probably going to feel like you know him by the end of this presentation because he's in about 75% of the slides. So talking about the model of what we do and what we focus on, I'm starting with the sale because that is the ultimate outcome, the ultimate goal is to make a sale to a consumer. And we sincerely believe that our products as a brand are going to make a difference in that person's life, and that's why we're making that sale, but also to make profit for the company that we're working for. And these sales happen in many places. They happen in physical stores, a lot of them. They happen online on your own brand e-commerce site or on Amazon. And increasingly in the future, we'll see them start to happen all over the internet, buy buttons that just pop up on social media and so on. So behind that sale, wherever it's happening is a decision. There is a consumer, particularly with a considered purchase, and a lot of the brands here today sell products that are considered purchases. And a consumer is thinking a lot about which product they should buy. So they're assimilating and gathering a lot of information. And probably the most important piece of information that they get is a recommendation from somebody. And that recommendation could come from somebody in the store. And, you know, a decade ago, or 15 years ago, this is where a lot of the people were who were consumers were seeking out for advice and recommendations. You would walk into a store and you would ask a retail sales associate, and that still happens today. But today, people are getting recommendations in far more places. Could be around the dinner table, friends and family, experts out in the field, so many different places. And increasingly, and now dominantly, people are looking to online reviews. It was mentioned a little earlier. So a huge proportion of the people, before they go out to make a purchase, they will read online reviews, multiple online reviews to inform that decision. They might end up making the purchase in a physical store, but they probably didn't get all the information they needed in that physical store. So what's behind that recommendation? What makes an effective recommendation? And Steve talked about a lot of that in a lot of detail, but we think that first and foremost, there is the person behind the recommendation, their credibility, and the degree to which you actually trust that recommendation. But it's also, what is their level of expertise? Do they know something about the products that they're recommending? Can they compare them? Do they understand your specific scenario and what the product means to you as a person seeking their advice? And the key insight of ExpertVoice, and even as far back as 3.5, is that you don't need to leave this to chance. You can go out and influence the extent to which these people who are sought for recommendations, the extent to which they make good recommendations, the number of recommendations, the power of those recommendations. And that's what we do. But that's all through learning first-hand experiences. So brands can teach people more about their products, and particularly these recommenders. And also, crucially, give them first-hand experiences. And at ExpertVoice, we think of these people who consumers seek out for information. We call them experts. But really, we mean all of the people who you might seek out for advice as a consumer. So again, it could be that it's a retail sales associate, but it also could be somebody who's an instructor on Snowbird, or a social influencer. And actually, in many cases, these are all the same person. Many times when I'm in an Uber, I speak to the person driving and I talk, have you heard of then Experticity or ExpertVoice? And the guy said to me, yes, he originally learned about it because he was working as a retail sales associate in a tiny mom and pop ski store. And the reason he did that was because he was so into skiing, but he was also a member of the Association of Snowboard Instructors because he was a snowboarder, and he was active online. So he was posting a lot of images, people were looking at those images, and he had a reasonable following. So he was all of those things. but a very influential person. So, as a brand, we're trying to enable this cycle. And it's hard. We have to find who these experts are. We have to figure out who they are. We have to engage them, educate them, try to get our product in their hands. We have to harness those recommendations and then also increase conversion through sales. So this is what we do and what we aim to do with our product at ExpertVoice. And over the last year or so, it's pretty amazing what has been happening in the industry. There are certain problems that we deal with that have gotten even worse over the last year. Authenticity, intent, and privacy. So these are things that make it even harder to do to enable that cycle, and things we think about a lot. So the first, authenticity. How do you ensure, as a brand, that consumers are getting recommendations that they can trust? If you look at what has been happening over the last year, somebody mentioned fake news, but fake reviews in particular. Reviews have really taken off as a place where people get information about what to purchase, but now people are doubting them for very good reason. If they're driving a lot of purchases, it means a lot of people are starting to do unscrupulous things with the reviews, trying to bolster the reviews for their products, and as a result, to what extent can you really trust them? And as a brand who doesn't want to participate in that sort of stuff, who doesn't want to be buying reviews, how do you compete with that? It's a real problem. Second is intent. So this is something we've talked about a lot in the past with respect to the consumer. We've talked about the fact that people skip ads. So when a consumer goes to YouTube and to see the video they want to see, but as a marketer, we play a pre-roll ad of something they really had no intention of seeing. Or when they go to a website to read content, but we cover the content with ads. Or they go to a social network to speak to their friends, but we put an ad in front of them. So the intent is misaligned with what the consumer actually wants to do there. That's a problem. So influencer marketing or advocacy marketing, what we do at ExpertVoice, is all what we believe actually gets past that. It's a much better approach. But then you still have to figure out how to get to the influencer. How do you get to the expert and give them the information that they need? How do you educate them about the product? That's a real challenge. And finally, privacy. So I think for a long time, in the early days of internet advertising and collecting data about people and using that for targeting, I remember in the industry where we were talking about, to what extent are people going to accept this? It feels like a violation of privacy that we're collecting all this information. But after a few years passed, and it was like, well, it seems like people are cool with it, right? I mean, if it allows them to get the right ad targeted at them, then it seems like they really don't mind that we taking so much of their information. It turns out that was wrong. And that recently, a couple of things have happened. In sort of aligned with this whole fake news, fake reviews, that sort of thing, people have started thinking more carefully about information and where they're getting it from, but also what information is being captured about them. And when they discovered through things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, how much information social networks had about them, and how cavalier tech companies were about the information that was being collected, I think consumers are starting to think about this very differently, and we're seeing like a wave that will only grow of rejection of the fact that so much information should be collected. And the question is, for people like us, where a crucial part of what we do is finding those experts, using information to find them. It seemed for a while that the social graph was really a great way to do that, but the social networks are shutting that down. For good reason. There's a backlash against the collection of that information, and so they're going to get more and more careful about the way they collect information, the kind of information they collect, and crucially for us, the amount that they share that information with us. And so we have to think about, as a brand, we need to think about how do we get access to the people that are so important? How do we get access to these experts? So we believe we're building the solution to these problems. I mean, that's what animates us, that's what we're passionate about. And there are 5 main pieces to this. First of all, we find the most influential experts for your brands. That's what we set out to do. We recruit them into our network, and once in our network, they become experts that have opted into being targeted by your brands. And we would like to work with you to enable that targeting, to help you to find your network within the network. The second thing is we want to make these experts better recommenders of brands and products. And like I said earlier, this is all about that learning and first-hand experience. But the big difference between, to an expert, ExpertVoice seems a little like a social network, increasingly, as we add more features where they interact with other people. But it's a different kind of social network. If an expert goes to Facebook, the reason they're going there is not to see an ad, they're going there to interact with their family. When an expert comes to ExpertVoice, they're explicitly making the decision to come and interact with you. That's their whole goal for being there, is to get your products, to learn more about your brands. That's explicitly what they want to do. So we interview a lot of people for the company. There's one interview, I always ask candidates, do you have any questions for me? And there's a question that a lot of candidates have asked, which they believe is kind of a gotcha question for me. And it is, well, okay, so I see how this works. I see how your model works in the case where it's a fantastic product and the expert reads about it or learns about it through their education. They receive it, they get first-hand experiences, and then obviously they're going to recommend that. But what if it's not a good product? How does your model work then? And my answer is so easy. It's just like, it doesn't work. Kind of the fundamental assumption is we're working with brands who sincerely believe that their products are great products and are going to make a difference. And that's what we're doing through education and seeding. We're just getting these products and experiences into their hands. So, recommendations. We capture and measure expert recommendations. So this you will see in one of the product labs. By the way, that's what the little icon is for there. For the first, ExpertVoice has always been about recommendations. In 3.5, it was about enhancing the recommendations that are made at retail by retail sales associates. These days, the kinds of recommendations that experts in the network make are not only at retail or on the slopes, it's also online. Much of it is online. And so when you're educating somebody in ExpertVoice, you're also priming them to write a good Amazon review. So it's also online. But for the first time, what we're doing at ExpertVoice is we're starting to capture these recommendations as a kind of review on product detail pages initially, but also elsewhere in future. So this is very important because it allows us to measure, to some extent, the impact that the education and seeding is having on experts. You can see, what are they thinking? What might they be saying in the store, or what might they be saying to their family about the product? They're telling us that through making these recommendations on our platform. And later, there's also the possibility of actually using that content and syndicating it onto your website, for example, like we do today with UGC. And that brings me to the final one, which is amplifying consumer conversion. So we do some of this today. I would say an example of this is where we help you to syndicate UGC photos that have been taken by experts, for example, onto product detail pages where we know they amplify conversion. But this is an area where, if I were to point out one thing where we are the most aspirational, it is about how do we help you to take experts and take recommendations and amplify conversion. How do we do that in more ways, in more places? So that's the fourth one. The final one is to measure all the things. So we have had issues with, we capture an enormous amount of data. We've had issues with accuracy and consistency, and there's a huge investment that we're making into making that data pipeline rock solid. But also, for all the different scenarios that you have, creating the specific reports that you need for the kind of work that you're doing, and ultimately demonstrating that ROI. So this is kind of a cheat sheet of everything I've just said. The one additional thing is that blue bar at the top. One of the things that we've been focusing a lot of attention on over about the last year is this is an abstract model. It implies in many different scenarios. It applies if you're trying to increase retail sell-through, if you're running a pro deals program and you'd like to increase your revenue, or if you're doing earned media marketing or influencer marketing. It applies in all of those cases. But in each of those cases, your scenario is a little different. The reports you need, the kind of education you need, is it very much training or is it more promotional? And what we're trying to do in the products we're building is enable those specific scenarios. So you'll see that in the product labs later, where there's more flexibility, for example, in the kind of content we're doing or the kind of reports we're generating. So the thing I was supposed to do, and I have a few minutes, so I think I will actually do it, is just introduce the ExpertVoice lab. So there will be 3 labs, and for each of those we'll be running 3 sessions in parallel. So 3 different rooms. So 3 labs, 3 sessions. So everybody should be able to attend each of the 3 sessions. I think on your badge, you have a color at the back of your badge. I think it's red, green, or blue. So I think if you attend that one first, we'll kind of be off to a good start. I think that's the plan. Right, so each one of the rooms has a different color. So if you have blue, go to the blue room first. So during these labs, some of what we'll be presenting, a lot of it, is real. It's live and in production. Some of it is brand new. Actually, a lot of it is brand new. So you'll be the first people to see it. And there will be opportunities to join beta programs for some things. So please watch out for those. Some of what we present or talk about will be aspirational. It will be some things that we have in the near term, coming up in the near term roadmap. But we'll try to be clear about what is real and what is coming soon. So the 3 areas are flexible future of content. So here we're really opening up content. In addition to the rich educational content we've always done, we want to allow you to bring your own content where you have it and where it's appropriate for ExpertVoice. We want you to produce content faster, and we have templatized ways of doing that now, and also making the kinds of content a little bit more flexible and interactive. For example, having an alternative to an edugame in some scenarios. That's flexible content. The second one is this whole new area for us, which is collecting recommendations. So you might have seen the expert experience today where we are collecting these recommendations and they're coming in at, the kinds of recommendations are really fantastic, the level of detail and also the volume of them given the extent to which we've actually promoted this. But it's really taking off. But in addition to that, the tools that we've started building that you will be able to use to easily go through those recommendations, ultimately even interact with them to make it a lot more convenient for you to. I think it's closing the circle that Steve was talking about, the interaction. And finally, it's a project internally that the name of the project is Simple Analytics. The engineers in the project hate that name because it's anything but simple under the covers. But really, it's about being simple for you so that it's easy to create the reports that you need and flexible enough to give you the specific KPIs, the specific numbers that you need in your business. Interactivity, please. If there are questions that you have during these presentations, don't hesitate to ask them. We'd really love these to be interactive sessions more than one-way presentations. Thank you.